Welcome to Heart with Michael, featuring your host, Michael Lieben. Our program is designed to empower the bereaved community with information and stories from those who have suffered the most terrible loss. Michael himself, a bereaved father, will be meeting with people from around the world to share and to draw hope from their experiences. And now, here is Michael Lieben.
Welcome to our Season 1 bonus episode of Heart to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved. Our purpose is to empower bereaved members of our community with resources, support, and advocacy information. Today's show is Grieving During the Holidays, Tips for Survivors. And here with us today is Pastor James Driskell. Pastor Driskell has a vast amount of experience in caring for those going through loss in hazardous situations. He has served in the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve for 29 years with over 2,000 hours of operational time on Coast Guard boats. He was involved in a variety of situations to comfort the dying, injured, and survivors. As a police chaplain, he has been called on scene to comfort victims, families of suicide, homicide, and drug overdose victims. He earned a unit of Clinical Pastoral Education as a chaplain in a very large senior housing and medical center. Pastor Driskell has earned his undergraduate degree at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and his Master's of Divinity from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. He is currently the pastor of First St. John's Lutheran Church in York, Pennsylvania, where he established a grief share group to serve those who have lost loved ones. Welcome, Pastor Driskell.
Shalom. How are you, Michael?
Shalom, shalom to you, sir. We're doing very well, thank you.
It's great to talk to you, brother.
This is the holiday season, usually a time when most people celebrate and find joy. But for some of us who are bereaved, it's difficult to experience joy, especially when we see everyone around us in such a joyful mood. I understand that in First St. John's, you have a program to deal with stress during the holidays. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what you teach in your church?
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to also make sure I give credit to Tammy Bosley. Tammy's been the one that's picked this program up and really driven it. And she's a lay person, but the one thing about Grief Share is that it really is very lay driven. So, you know, when you have lay people picking it up and running with it, it really does help a lot of people that are involved.
Why is that better that it's lay people and that it doesn't come from you?
A time and a place, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You know what I'm saying? Because there are going to be times where, yeah, you want a professional. You want somebody who can kind of give you a little more space. And there are other times when you really want kind of somebody who's more like me type of, you know what I'm saying? And is somebody who you can maybe feel a little more comfortable crying on their shoulder or that kind of thing. It's more women driven because obviously, statistically, women, you know, tend to outlive husbands and that kind of thing. And so when we have, you know, there's me and I'm there to help people. And we've had some other ladies kind of come in and out of the group, but Tammy's been the constant there all along. And so it just seems to be something that especially older women who've lost spouses can relate a lot better to women. It doesn't mean that guys are excluded or, you know, any of that sort of thing. But that's just been our particular experience. So to kind of go back to your original question in terms of why in particular during the holidays, grief share is important all the time. And being a part of a group is being very important a lot of time. We do a couple other different kinds of groups there. And the one constant that you see with a lot of these support groups as it is, and certainly you can imagine it in terms of substance abuse and that kind of thing. What do people do when they kind of get really absorbed in something? They pull back, right? They kind of isolate themselves. They take themselves away. Certainly kind of the genius in terms of groups like AA and NA is no, you got to be a part of this group. You got to be accountable. You have to be here. You have to, you know, be upfront and frank. Well, grieving groups, that's not the need. We're not trying to get you into a group and say, tell everybody why you're grieving. But it is in terms of you got to be with other people. You have to be there because We do an unemployment group. And again, sort of the same kind of, obviously, when people lose jobs, that's a form of grieving. And a lot of times what happens to people, they kind of get into their head, I'm the only one. I'm here. I've got to deal with it all by myself. I've got to confront it. That kind of thing. And the holidays are unique in the grieving process. It's a difficult time. Every time I do a funeral, I always tell the people involved, look, emotions are going to crop up. Things are going to happen. Stuff is going to all of a sudden pop up in your brain. And it's especially true in terms of the holidays, because you've got folks who've been married 40, 50 years. What's been the constant for 40 or 50 years?
Wow.
You get to December 25th, right?
Right.
And, you expect to see your husband there, or your brother, and one thing that does seem to happen in terms of holidays, it's kind of more extreme, but a lot of times people just say, well, so-and-so is not going to be there to open presents, and they're not going to be there for dinner. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't go, and at some point you do see families, groups kind of just fading away, because there's a lot of people I just don't want to deal with. I just don't want to. And that's really the worst possible outcome, obviously, right?
Well, we talked about that a lot during this last year, and we talked about sharing grief, and we said that grief shared is grief lessened or grief lightened.
Yep, exactly.
And I think that's absolutely true. And I think also that the holidays have a way of amplifying it. It's not necessarily the holiday, because it could be a holiday that you're used to seeing the family with. It could be Thanksgiving, it could be, Christmas or any holiday.
Yep.
But even just a personal holiday, like a birthday.
Yep, exactly.
I think all through the year. Absolutely, sure.
Yep.
Now, I'm assuming also from the way you're describing, you tend to deal more with adults. Many of our listeners are bereaved parents, but I don't really think that there's a great difference here. I think that the grief will strike you when it strikes you in similar ways.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But it's like you said, the holidays tend to amplify that, because, other times of the years, they're constants, but there's not really that constant thread. Whereas Christmas, what do you do on Christmas? You get up Christmas morning, everybody gathers around the tree, everybody gives out presents, and everybody sits afterwards and shares, and everybody has dinner together. So that is that one time of the year where you're gonna relive that every year. And after so many decades, you kind of have it scripted in your head.
So in about a minute, what are some of the things that go on in that group? What do you tell people? We've just laid out a myriad of things that can go wrong. Give me something that will help
in
them.
1 minute. Sure. Okay. Well, I think the big thing that you always want to make sure people are aware of is, emotions are going to pop up. And you really have to kind of allow that. Trying to suppress the emotions in that kind of circumstances is only going to aggravate the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And that doesn't mean it's going to aggravate to the problem of having a big emotional outburst versus hey, I really miss my husband. I really miss my son. I really miss this person, that person. And so that's really kind of the biggest thing that I do as a pastor, normally dealing with people who are dealing with death, and certainly in the group, that those are going to be the big aspects.
Okay, we're going to have to sneak in a break. But when we come back, we're going to be talking with Pastor Driskell about how friends can help their bereaved friends during the holidays.
Hi, I'm John Montez of NBC's hit a cappella show, The Sing-Off. In a cappella music, it takes a team to create a sound that many will enjoy, just like it'll take a team to help my good friend Miles Schweitzer, an HLHS survivor. Let's help Miles fulfill his dream and make a big enough sound to bring awareness to congenital heart disease. Please visit them at GoFundMe.com/The Miles Project. Miles with the Y. Again, that's GoFundMe.com, The Miles Project. This is for Miles.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our program, please send an email to Michael Lieben at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to Heart to Heart with Michael.
Welcome back, Pastor Driskell. Before the break, we were discussing your church program helping bereaved members of your community survive the holidays. Well, last year on Christmas, there were a lot of terrorist activities, specifically in Europe. In general, it's difficult to be joyful under an atmosphere of terror. Even in America since 9/11, it's been more difficult for people to be joyful. How do you address the feeling people may have of fear and trepidation during the holiday season instead of joy and celebration?
Well, I understand what you're saying. And certainly you, being in Israel, have a much different perspective than Americans. And I'm not trying to minimize the issue. Certainly, being from Boston with the marathon bombing, I had friends who were. I have one friend who was at the Pentagon when it was bombed. I have friends who are New York City police officers and firefighters, people that worked in it. So, I mean, believe me, I get it. But by the same token, I don't think that there's that level in the United States. Let me put it this way. I've never had to deal with that particularly. If you're talking about like New Year's Eve in Times Square, yeah, that would be a concern. And it certainly is. And New Yorkers, the city in New York certainly responded to that. They certainly had stepped up when they had the New York Marathon a month ago, especially considering that there had been a terrorist attack around Central Park just a couple of weeks before the marathon.
I guess the takeaway is that the United States is, in a way, I would say blissfully lagging behind Europe and other parts of the world, where it hasn't yet become an issue that's strong enough to take down the holidays.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't take down the holidays in the way that.
I don't think that it really does. No, because the holidays in the United States, except for things like maybe, Times Square, the Macy's Day Parade, and maybe those kind of things, but for the most part, it's not. The holidays are much more family oriented, and so it's going to be large family gatherings, certainly, but not gatherings. The whole point of terror is to do something on a large scale to make people disrupt what they're doing, and in that respect, it's not really. There's not going to be an opportunity to do that. And then, it's certainly an issue with Americans of just being more aware, not living in fear, because that's kind of caving in and losing the battle. But it is an issue because even it doesn't have to be terror related to be aware of something that's going on around you that needs to be addressed. So it's just a healthy thing as a good lifestyle is to be aware and exercise discretion.
No, I think what you're saying is that you are very, very lucky and in a very real sense blessed to be where you are and not in other places.
By the same token, don't count on that being a forever thing either,
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. But to end a little bit on a happier note, as this is a holiday special, I understand that the awareness in America is there, but the need is perhaps a little bit less, and that's a very blessed thing for the holidays and in general. Yeah, so that's. And as it turns out, we're going to have to sneak in another break. So I want to thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your advice with us. And when we come back, we're going to talk with you more about dealing with the crisis of faith during the holidays.
Home Tonight Forever by the Baby Blues Sound Collective. I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever.
Heart to Heart with Michael is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more.
Did you know that most men suffer from beard itch, ingrown hairs, and a dry face, all because they're not using the right shaving tools? At woodrazor.com, we sell handmade heirloom quality badger hair brushes that exfoliate the skin, open the pores, and stimulate hair follicles, which gives a gentleman a closer, more comfortable shave and a clean face. Visit our website, woodrazor.com, where you can learn more about men's skincare and check out our professional shaving tools. A perfect gift for your man, built to last for generations. That's woodrazor.com.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Michael's program, please email him at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to our program.
Welcome back, listeners, to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved. We're here with Pastor Driskell, who is sharing his experience and advice with us about how to handle the holidays when bereaved. Pastor Jim, we talked about dealing with joy during difficult times. Now let's talk about how you help people who are dealing with a crisis of faith during the holidays. What do you say to them, and what can you do to help them?
Sure. Well, and, I did want to point out, especially, in your situation with your daughter, Liel, it's just so heartening to see people taking those kind of personal tragedies and doing something so positive with them and proactive and certainly what you're doing here to honor her memory in that way. And so, you hope that people look to God, because God's going to test our faith constantly. That's just and it's not to be mean. It's not to torture us. The test of faith, the key word is test, right? Why do you take a math test in high school? So that you can show that you've learned more, and it's to make you grow and to make you progress. And certainly when God tests us, in our life, it may not seem fair. It may not seem the right time or the right place or the right color but on the other hand, God's infinitely more brilliant than I'll ever be ever and ever and ever. And he's going to do things in my life that I may not like, I may not want, but on the other hand, they're necessary because he hasn't left us to be where we are in some sort of static la la land. It's just not what this world is for. It's a world of sin and death. And I think when you have Christians who are properly taught and properly understand the faith, that when they come to these kind of things, the faith's going to be tested. But certainly Paul addressed the issue in terms of, we don't mourn like the pagans, or that's the way he put it, his words, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
We don't mourn like other people. We mourn because, we miss the person. We wish the person were at their proper spot when we sat around and exchange gifts, but they're not there. And we mourn that, but we don't mourn in terms of the fact, well, that's it. That's the end of it. It's not going to come back. And so when people start to question their faith, as Christians, we should be questioning our faith. We should be making it a constant task. We should be advancing. If anybody is in Christianity thinks it's a continual party and blessing and la la land, that's just not realistic. That's not how the saints lived. That's certainly not how Jesus lived, in terms of, especially in terms of the passion, the beating, and the crucifixion. That's not how we're supposed to live in this world. but we have the promise of the resurrection. And we have the promise that in the resurrection, we are going to live in that world that God intended us to live in, that he originally made and we messed it up because, well, we had a Burger King attitude, right? We went it our way.
Well, would you say then that when you're comforting somebody who's mourning, they're mourning more for themselves, that a sense of loss that they feel, but that the person they're missing, and it's valid to miss that person, that person is sort of taken care of in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, no question in terms, look, I get it. We're going to feel bad. We're being deprived of a relationship that, and especially when it's in terms of young people and people that, in our opinion, they shouldn't die. That shouldn't happen to the person in that age or, in that situation, but people do. And so we have to look at it in terms of, we know where we're going to be. We know how it's going to be with that person in the next life. So, yeah, again, Paul kind of addressed it in terms of, okay, we're going to grieve because we miss that person. And we certainly are sad that person had to go through what they had to go through when death occurred. But by the same token, as Christians, we're not called to dwell on that. We're not called to let that stop us. We're not called to lose our faith in that respect. We are called to trust God and what he's going to do. And as I said before, take it in ways that are going to honor that person. And certainly what you've done here in terms of this program of saying, look, everybody, and this is certainly one of the major points of Grief Share, it's going to happen. There's no way around it. And
yet it's always unexpected when it does happen. I mean,
well, yeah, sometimes, most of the time it is unexpected. It really is. Certainly there are people that have the benefit of, I know this person's dying. I know that the end is going to be very soon. And
it doesn't
and
help.
Yeah,
it doesn't help. I mean, you know what? My father was sick for a very, very long time, and
right.
We knew it was, but we didn't know tomorrow, the next day, or even a year from now. He was deep into his Alzheimer's, but largely in physically good condition.
Right.
And so when one morning we got the call at 4:00 in the morning that he was gone, it was a shock. Even though it wasn't totally unexpected and completely out of the blue, it was a shock. Right. And we've talked about this in other circumstances. I remember recently my friend's mother passed away, and she was struck that many people would ask her, well, how old was your mom? As if to say, if she had lived a long life, that was okay.
Right.
But and I've said this before, your mother is still your mother. And if she lives to be 1,000, it'll still hurt.
It's too early, right?
It's too early, and it'll still hurt.
Yep.
And that's the sort of thing that when it happens to people, they look up and they say, why me?
What happened? Why?
And your friend looking on could say, well, this is totally expected. What are you on about?
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that? What do you say to your friend who's trying to be nice, but just doesn't get it, that you're hurting in a way that he can't understand? What do you tell that person who's hurting?
Well, I assure you, Michael, that if I had the magic wand in terms of that, I would write the book. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The thing that I really emphasize with people, and I really honestly have to remind myself, you know what? There just are not going to be ways and times, a lot of times, that you're saying anything is really going to. Praying with that person is certainly going to be, I submit, more efficacious, more positive and uplifting, but just being an ear. And one thing that I emphasize, with lay people a lot, because obviously I get the question a lot, is in terms of that ministry of presence. And I'll tell you, to be honest, even in the training that I've had in counseling and seminary and that kind of thing, that's what they emphasize. You're there.
You know what?
You're
now
here.
You're crossing over. Now you're crossing over into my lane. No pun intended. Because one of the things that we do in the Jewish community, of course, is when we mourn, there's that 7-day period where you sit at home and do nothing, and your friends come and comfort you. And sometimes the best way to comfort people is just to say nothing.
Put an arm around them.
We've talked about this on this program before.
I'm here for you.
We've talked about it on this program before. When Job was mourning, his friends were really helpful until they opened their mouths.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but what happened with his friends? God gave him a good spanking afterwards. What are you guys doing,
How dare you say that sort of thing? This must be yours. This is your problem. What have you done?
Yeah. Why are you presuming to do to say the things that you're saying? That's not for you to say. That's not your call. And on behalf of all those mourners, I can say, we do that to ourselves. We already beat ourselves up 1,000 ways from Sunday. You don't have to come and help with that. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just because I'm going through this horrible period does not mean I've, been a horrible sinner. That's just not the case. There's plenty of people who go through suffering that you look at it, and you just really cannot, for the life of you, think, why on earth is that person having to endure this? And that's certainly going to be one of the big mysteries of life, that in the resurrection, we're going to look back and wonder, it's going to be obvious at that point. And we're going to, okay, and wow, isn't a God a great God, and giving glory to God and all that he does. And even in the times that we think are just so inhuman and just so unfair, and why
absolutely.
And all of a sudden, in that perfect world and that eternal resurrection, we're going to look at it and go, okay, I got it.
But you have to know to look forward to the point that you will get it one day. Even
exactly, you do. And then I think that's one thing that the Christian church has really fallen down on is the resurrection, and I have a whole sermon on that, but suffice to say,
then come back and do it again.
I
have to say, come back. But I have to say, we're pretty much running out of time.
Sure.
And so I'm going to end with a Woody Allen quote. There's a scene in Love and Death where it's the Russian Revolution and the battle is hard and raging and going really bad. And somebody says, God is truly testing us. And Woody Allen says, well, next time I hope he gives us an oral. Anyway, that concludes this bonus episode of Heart to Heart with Michael. Again, I want to thank Pastor Driskell for sharing with us and hope his advice has brought some assistance to those who are listening. Please join me next year in 2018 when we'll start Season 2. Season 2 will be devoted to a celebration of life where we talk about how loved ones who have gone have changed our lives and have helped make us who we are. So I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday season, no matter what holiday you're celebrating. And there are many, 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 many. So remember, it is okay to be joyful.
Amen. Absolutely.
Thank you again for joining us. We hope you have gained strength from listening to our program. Heart to Heart with Michael can be heard every Thursday at noon Eastern Time. We'll talk again next time when we'll share more stories. If you would like to continue today's discussion, please join us right after the program in the Hug podcast chat room on Pal Talk.